there's been a bit of a breakdown in collaboration for a myriad of reasons that I have personally seen, which is why I think it needs to be our absolute priority in this industry. And there is a lot of good examples of good collaboration, but I think especially as industry associations, we're really challenged to show value. And so sometimes, we are thinking about what's good for CAP, we'll say, or what's good for Cereals Canada, and is it good for everybody? And I think that that's where we really need to take our hats off on really key issues and say it isn't just about me, it's about something bigger than myself.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Grain Growers of Canada podcast, Beers with Branden. I'm your host, Branden Leslie, here at my home farm to record what I think will be a great episode in person. This Summer Series podcast is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Beer Canada. Beer Canada is the voice of the people who make our nation's beers, and their members account for 90% of the beer produced in Canada. The sale of beer supports 149,000 Canadian jobs, generates $14 billion in gross domestic product, and $5.7 billion in government tax revenues. Beer Canada has represented Canadian brewers since 1943. I'd encourage you to mark down on your calendars October 6th, which is Canada Beer Day. We need your participation to ensure the Canadian beer industry and the many people and businesses connected to it, including farmers, maltsters, can and bottle manufacturers, drivers, warehouse workers, servers, and bar and restaurant owners, can continue contributing to a prosperous Canada in the future. You can find out more information at canadabeerday.ca. Today's guest is a person I met just 1 week after I started with the Grain Growers of Canada, and we quickly became fast friends. She is one of the kindest and most talented women that I've ever had the chance to get to know, and I couldn't be happier to have her here with us today. Brenna Mahoney is the General Manager of the Keystone Agricultural Producers. Prior to her current role, Brenna has worked for the past 5 years in communications and stakeholder relations with Cereals Canada. While working in the nonprofit industry, Brenna supported the national cereals value chain by ensuring communications and outreach were at the foundation of all organizational efforts. Brenna has contributed to and built national coalitions and partnerships focused on advancing the Canadian brand, market access, public trust, grain nutrition and health, and sustainability. She holds a bachelor's degree in human ecology with a major in clothing and textile sciences from the University of Manitoba. After working in this field, she pursued her certification in human resource management from Red River College. She has significant experience working in project management, communications, and consensus building. Brenna has a passion for agriculture and working with members of the entire value chain to ensure positive collaboration from all aspects of the Canadian agricultural industry. Brenna, welcome to Beers with Branden. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you, Branden. I'm so happy to be here at your parents' farmhouse. It's awesome to be out here.
It feels so nice to be back to a little
and
bit of
to be together.
Here. I know.
I can't believe it.
It's been far too long. We only met a couple of times, and then the world took us apart. So it's great to be back here.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to first ask, you went from a textiles degree, which firstly, I'm very curious what that is, but secondly, you also managed, you were the office manager of a law firm in downtown Toronto just 5 years ago or so, and now you're the general manager of Manitoba's General Farm Organization.
Yes.
How the hell did that happen?
That's a really good question, Branden, and it's one that I love to tell because I'll kind of start at the end and then work back to the very beginning. Agriculture is one of those industries that really is a place for everyone. There's something here for everybody. And I really mean that. If you want to work in a really passionate, engaging industry where continuous learning, collaboration are at the core, agriculture is a place for you. And all you need to do is really pull up that chair. And that's what I've found. So many moons ago in a different life, taking you back to the beginning now, when I was in university, I pursued a degree in textile science, clothing and textiles. And what that is, so going back to your question, I get that a lot. So everything that contains fibers, whether they be natural or synthetic, can be used for clothing, so the clothing that we're wearing, or for other industrial purposes, or for the biomedical industry. So that's what the degree is on the value chain, and that's how naturally it has fit into my working in agriculture. And oddly enough, it's in the Faculty of Agriculture now at the University of Manitoba. So I worked in that field for a number of years, and I ended up pursuing, after working in that, I'd been in the management role for a long time wherever I had worked. Human resource management was something that I had always wanted to pursue. It's about that continuous learning, that commitment to how I am and the work I do. And what I want to continue to do is always educate and learn along the way. It was another tool in that toolbox. How do you manage people? We're in a complex working environment, especially as we grow and learn as businesses about who we want to be and what success looks like and who we need around our tables. So I wanted to pursue HR. I ended up working in Vancouver. I was living in Vancouver at the time at a labor law firm. And so I was the office manager there and HR manager. I ended up moving back to Winnipeg, and that's actually where I landed at Cereals Canada. So with human resource management, it is provincially mandated. And so when I was getting my designation, I was moving everything over to the Manitoba HR designation process. And I needed about 3 months. So I went to a recruiting agency, said, send me somewhere for 3 months, landed at Cereals Canada, and never expected to stay. That was never my intention. It was definitely to be temporary. But I'd say within about a month, I had met so many people, working with Cam Dahl, who I know is on the program today. It'll be great to hear from him. And just really seeing the passion and the dedication of the people around me. Everyone wants you to do well. And I think that that's really such a strong message. That's why I volunteer with agriculture in the classroom, because I think it's so important for us to tell young people or people of any ages, if you're looking for a good career opportunity, agriculture is a great place. And now I'm at Keystone Agricultural Producers. And as you say, in a short period of time, I've been able to get here. But it's not just because of my efforts. I have the support of a lot of people around me who are looking at that success, teaching me, putting effort into me. And that's why I'm able to sit here with you today and share that with you.
Well, we're happy you're here, and I got
Thank
a feeling
you.
you're not going back to the textiles industry. You're gonna be in
No,
agriculture
I
for a
am
long
here
time.
for life. And actually, that's what's interesting. I've been at Keystone Agricultural Producers, CAP, for this is my 4th week on the job. And I've had the opportunity to speak with almost all of our board members and our commodity groups here in the province. And that's really what it comes down to is I'm really passionate about this industry, and I'm not going anywhere. You're not getting rid of me. But that's what's great about meeting someone like yourself. We're going to be working together for a long time to come. So
Absolutely.
it's the relationships.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that we were able to form one so quickly. You mentioned something in that first answer that is a program that I don't know how familiar people are, the Ag in the Classroom program. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that is done there and why that's so important, especially as we have further and further generations disconnected from the farm?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think you've identified part of it is that we have a growing number of our community that are knowing less and less about agriculture. Where, when you live in the city of Winnipeg or even Branden or Steinbach or Selkirk, you're surrounded by agriculture. Yet it's something that is such a barrier for so many people. They don't realize that when they drive past a beautiful yellow field, that's canola and someone planted that and someone's nurturing that there's a total lack of connection. So I think it's partly about that. A big part of it is also public trust. And we know we have a growing industry that has a need for new ideas and innovation and where we're going next. So agriculture in the classroom is really positioned to get people at a young point in their life. So whether they be in grade school or kindergarten, even all the way up to high school, to kind of capture their imagination and plant that seed, pun intended, about where they could go next. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be an economist, I don't know who would want to do that. I'm saying that because Cam is one. But there's a place for you here. If you want to be an engineer, there's a place for you in agriculture. If you're into computers and computer science, there's a place for you here. We have huge data challenges in agriculture. So we need people around that table to be engaged. So agriculture in the classroom is linked into the education system provincially. There's also a national organization, Ag in the Classroom Canada, that is the overarching body to all the Ag in the Classrooms in each of the provinces. And they deliver on educational programming around agriculture, as well as talking about opportunities for employment, especially when you get into those later years as well. But it's a great organization to support and be aware of. If you work in agriculture, ask questions, get engaged, volunteer, go work with whoever the team is in your province, because they're doing a lot of good work and need support from all of us.
It's a good piece of advice that I think I will take, and I encourage all the folks listening to.
It's great.
So I'd like to move on to something that I know is an area that you care about, and you're a young woman in what traditionally probably has been seen as a male-dominated industry. And when I joined the grain growers, I don't want to say I was surprised, but I was by the amount of women. I remember I went to a Zoom meeting and I was the only guy. It was 10 women and me. And listening to them and the intelligence and the passion that they had for the sector was excellent. And then I've continued to hear about all the programs in post-secondary education that have young girls entering in a variety of different agricultural fields. So I'm just kind of curious what your experience has been as a woman in this industry, and where is the future heading?
It's interesting. So this is going back a long time ago. My high school was an all-girls school. My university program was primarily women. I've been surrounded by women in almost all of my job fields. I've never had a male boss until I worked at Cereals Canada. So it was interesting for me to enter into a really, like you said, traditionally male-dominated industry. For me personally, and this goes back to my statement about pulling up a chair and having that seat at the table, I know barriers do exist, and I think we're doing a lot better of a job. And I know Aaron has talked a lot about that as the executive director of Grain Growers as well, about how do we have a more diverse and inclusive industry. But I think we're making some really significant strides. It's really important to get people into this industry as much as possible, no matter who they are or where they're from. And I think that's actually, we have a lot of allies outside of Canada who are moving here and are raising their families here, who want to be a part of agriculture or come from an agricultural background in their country where they come from. That's untapped. So going back to me as a woman in this industry, I think I'm one of many faces that are entering into the sector and finding a place and being celebrated. And having that seat at the table, I feel like I'm listened to, I'm respected. I feel like people take the time to educate me and teach me. So I don't feel like my gender has played a factor. And I'm sure that there, have been issues that I haven't seen. But I think the important message here is that I feel successful. And look, in a very short period of time, I've been able to take a leadership role that I take really seriously and I feel incredibly accountable to. And it's because of my capability. It's because of what I've been able to do to commit to the sector. And I think once we see more and more examples of that, I think we're going to continue to see the strides forward, and businesses making decisions on who they're hiring, how they're hiring them. Even, and I'll give a real personal example. I wasn't really qualified for the communications role on paper at Cereals Canada, but I was able to show that I could do it. I was able to demonstrate that. And I think that's where, when we look, putting on my HR hat, when we look at how we even traditionally hire people, their education is not necessarily a determination of their capability. So I think we need to think creatively about how we're picking people and how we're choosing people and how we're assessing them for their fit for the role, because that's what's really important.
It was extremely well said.
Thanks.
And you mentioned Erin Garlick, my executive director, and she's one of the best bosses I've ever had. And I've been fortunate to have fantastic bosses my entire life. And, it's really interesting. There's a number of our members and other agricultural organizations where executive directors, like the leaders, are women. And it's fantastic to see, and they're doing a great job. I guess the difference or the lag perhaps is at the board level. At the Grain Growers, we have, I believe, 3 women on our board. Which is an increase. What do you see the direction heading there? And obviously, I think it's positive, but what does that next step look like?
Well, I think specifically when we're looking at farmer-run organizations, and actually these are the discussions happening around our table as well. Meeting with my board over the past few weeks, we've even had a board meeting, and talking about how are we succession planning, how are we evolving our boards. And traditionally, what's happened is that a farm, where a farmer would maybe join a board of directors, their spouse might be having another job to supplement income, and or raising kids and working in town or whatever. So we haven't had that showcasing of the full farm experience, a full farm family at that table. That is definitely changing. And I think as we create more opportunities, and it's almost like the hiring practices. How are we identifying that people are the right fit to make us successful? So what is our path forward on actually identifying those people? And I think that's actually where we have a gap. I don't think we as an industry have a full understanding of where these people are or how we're engaging with them and that we're meeting them where they're at. So we definitely need to have that growth, that diversity. There's people on boards who have been on them for a really long time. They're looking to move on and educate the next generation. And so I think it's a myriad of challenge around boards, for example, from the gender side, but also from just the succession planning side, and having that diversity around the table of even what sector that they might be from is going to be helpful. So it'll be interesting to see how the next few years roll out, but I definitely know that there's commitments across the board. Yet again, pun intended. But there are commitments from our board on making sure that we're looking and we're attracting those right people.
Well, as you said earlier, merit too, right? That's what this is all about, and that's
and
what we're
giving
finding.
people a chance.
Yep.
I think giving people a chance, one of the biggest barriers I can say, and for anyone who's listening to this today, who have thought to themselves, hey, I'd really like to get involved in a board and I don't know how, just ask. It goes back to my statement. It's just about pulling up a chair and asking questions on how to get there. Don't eliminate yourself from it. You really need to make that effort on your own sometimes and ask those questions to put yourself there, because there's room for you and people want you there. And it doesn't matter if you're very experienced or you have all the answers. People are there to teach you along the way. So that's another big barrier that I've seen, is that there's an intimidation to being able to sit around those tables. But people want you there, and people want to educate you on what you need to know, on how to get to where we need to be as an industry. So it's exciting.
We've got a lot of good leaders in this industry to learn from.
Totally.
So, do you want to try a beer?
Absolutely.
All right. So today we'll be sampling beers from Winnipeg-based brewery, Fort Garry Brewing. Fort Garry Brewing has been making beer for 90 years, made by Manitobans for Manitobans. In 1994, Richard Hoshin resurrected Fort Garry Brewing as we know it today in South Winnipeg. His great-grandfather founded it in 1930. They are pioneers of craft brewing in Manitoba, and they make the same beer the same way they have been making it for 90 years. Sure, the copper kettles are gone, and the steam heat is now electric, but from their humble beginnings in a small Market Street warehouse to the current state-of-the-art facility, they have never strayed from their microbrewery tradition. Fort Garry's entire history has been about one thing: brewing the best, most flavorful, easy-drinking beer in Manitoba. The folks at Fort Garry are beer fans just like you and I, which is why they are dedicated to great flavors that satisfy and expand all palates. Whether that's their endless pursuit of the perfect, clean, pure-tasting lager, or creating scintillating, bold new flavors, Fort Garry will continue to do what they do best, because the passion is brewing the best-tasting beer for the most loyal beer drinkers in the country. Our province, our people, our beer.
It's great beer, Brandon. It's one of my favorites, actually.
I want you to try a quick sample here.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
This is the Pale English Amber Ale. It's a 5%, 18 IBU. It's a refreshing amber-hued British ale with a clean hop character, finished with Nottingham Ale yeast.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This looks great. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's solid beer.
That's really good.
That's solid beer.
Well, especially on a hot day like
Yeah.
this is real crisp.
This would be good on a cold day too, I think.
Yeah, this is crisp. I like it.
Well, I'll let you sip on that. And I should say, at the end of this, we're going to have a few of these. I need you to pick your favorite one. You can't cop out and say they're all good. I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite one.
I'll be very clear on
Good.
which my favorite is.
I think, well, you got one in the running right now.
Yes.
So going back to the conversation we were having earlier about women in agriculture, what advice would you give a young woman just entering early in her agricultural career, or what was a message that you now know that you would have shared with yourself 5 years ago even?
Well, it's interesting because I think mentorship plays a really huge role in this, and I think I was really fortunate on my hiring committee for my role at Cereals Canada. One of the people that had interviewed me actually said, I want to be her mentor. I want to work with her. And that was Trish Jordan, actually, from Monsanto. And so now she's with Bayer. Mm-hmm. And so I was really fortunate that right when I had entered into the industry and into my role, I had someone there coaching and guiding along the way. I don't think that that's always going to be the case. I think depending on what organization you're in, what stage that they're in, how big they are, you might not always have that right when you enter in. But I think, it goes back to what I was saying about people joining boards. Having that courage to be able to ask questions, seek out, take that leadership for yourself. I think this is kind of a life lesson in general that I've learned. It's not going to happen for you. It's not going to happen to you. There are things that come up in life that, yes, can be like that. But if you really want something and if you really care about it, it is going to have to come from within. So having that courage to say to your boss at your next performance evaluation, or not waiting till then, saying, I need mentorship. I need you to help seek out mentorship for me, and not being intimidated by hearing a no. Keep asking, keep looking. Talk to your colleagues, learn from them, ask questions. So I think because the more you hear and the more you learn, and the more you see, that's what's going to make you stronger. That's what's going to make you more knowledgeable. And one of the things I learned really early on, partly why I love working in this industry, is that there's always something new to learn, always. And it doesn't matter. And I have friends who have been farming for over 30 years and more, and they've done a lot of amazing things. They'll always say there's something always more to learn. And so when you look at that, everyone else around you is learning and trying to move the industry forward. So you're not alone in that. So you don't have to feel uncomfortable about asking questions or seeking out opportunities for yourself. It really is about taking control of it, not being afraid. And there's tons of opportunities out there once you start looking for it. And once you do one thing and another thing, join a board, volunteer. Like Ag in the Classroom is great. 4-H, there's all these different organizations who are looking for people to support. Get involved. Ask questions, and the rest will come with that.
That's pretty darn good advice. And you mentioned, I reminded of a conversation I had with Tom Steve on the podcast here just last week or very recently. He talked about that later in his career now, how he's kind of taking on that role of mentor, and to reach a certain point in your career, and it might not be throughout the entire process, but there are plenty of mentors out there. But it is a matter of finding, and you have to want it yourself. So I think that's a pretty good piece of advice that I'm going to take, actually.
Well, and it's interesting, it's that, and there are people that come into your life even for a moment in time that offer you that mentorship. And for Tom is someone who, more than a colleague, he's part of my ag family, absolutely, that I can call at any time and ask a question. So that's someone who's there more for the long term. But there are people who I've met on airplanes. There are people that I've met at a conference only once and had a really good opportunity to ask them about, what are you doing? What is your business doing that's different? What makes you excited? You learn something from that. So take those opportunities and connect. And that's what's so hard about COVID right now. Us being able to sit down together and how wonderful it is. That's been a barrier, I think. But I think that's where there are tools. Like I was on a Manitoba Women in Ag call the other day. It was a Zoom call with Trevor Heck. We're talking about diversity and inclusion. And I was able to meet a whole bunch of people through that event that I would have not met before. And there were people outside of Manitoba that was there. So new and old faces and new opportunities to learn. So it was great.
It's science and tech and innovation in our sector. It's not quite the same as the vaccines, but I'm really glad that they exist and we're able to kind of get vaccinated and bring this back here. But
let's say cheers to that,
cheers
Branden.
Cheers to vaccines and science and tech.
I love it.
So you've been the general manager. You said this is your 4th week here, general manager of CAP for 4 weeks now. First, can you tell us a bit about the transition of the organization? I think you hopefully took a little time off between roles, and what CAP offers to farmers and how it kind of differs from commodity associations.
Well, the foundation of CAP is being that farmer's voice here in the province of Manitoba. What's super unique and what really attracted me to the role is that showcasing of diversity of Manitoba. What we have in this province is spectacular. And whether you have a small operation or a large operation, whether you're a direct marketer or you're working in supply manage, you have a seat at our table and you're working together on moving the sector forward. So I think when you look at what is in it for farmers, I think it's being a part of that bigger agricultural story. And when we talk about the priorities of CAP, and working on policy and trying to identify the barriers that are in existence for farmers and trying to move us forward is really challenging and hard to manage. And so we need all of those voices there in order to navigate that, so that we're able to all go forward. We're all able to work together. Things like public trust, it's not just about one commodity, it's about everybody.
Yeah.
It's, I love working with CCFI, the Center of Food Integrity, and their data, indicates, and they ask a great question. Do you trust a farmer? Yes. But do you trust a farmer that uses GMOs or crop protection products, or anything that a modern farmer would do? And the answer is usually no. So that doesn't matter if you are a hog producer or you're a grain grower. You're facing a lot of the same barriers. So that's where CAP can really encapsulate and address those issues together.
I'd like to come back to that public trust. I think we're going to talk about that a little later on here. But you did mention some of the priorities of CAP. So what are your main priorities as the new leader of this organization?
I think it's that collaboration. Okay. I think working together is really, really important. I'll tell you a little story here, Branden. I was surprised when I was picked, in the sense that I'm not a policy person, and CAP is the lead policy organization. It's the lobby group for Manitoba producers, and I really asked myself why. Like, what was it? And it came back to the core focus right now for CAP is about really moving forward into the future, and we need to be able to talk to people. We need to be able to connect with farmers here in this province and beyond. We need to talk to consumers, and that's where my skill set has really, why I now know like this is the right fit, and feeling really proud and excited about the role, is because I'm able to come in and bring that communication, stakeholder relations, that coalition building. And we need that now more than ever. Right now we have a drought here in the province of Manitoba. The prairie provinces in general have been hit really hard. The U.S. is also going through a drought. We all need to come together here in this province to find a path forward. What are resources for farmers? What are options for farmers right now? That's a big one. What are my options? What can I do? What are the resources available? And that doesn't just hit one commodity. That is hitting everybody in one way or another, whether it be from feed or whether it be from, the livestock. Can my animals survive? Do I have enough water? Those are real things that are impacting everyone. So I think that really, when I look at my priorities, is ensuring that everyone around my table knows that I'm here to work together, build that consensus, really prioritizing priorities. How do we, and as that farmer's voice, it's really easy to look at each of our districts. We have 12 districts here in the province, and say, what's going on here and what's going on there. Whether it be up in District 12, which I used to live up in the Paw, or we're in District 4, which is where I am now in St. Anne. There can be some division of priorities there, right? So how do we make sure that we as a organization are able to identify, okay, what's actually going to make a difference today? What's actually going to happen to be able to be successful for the sector to move forward? We can be taken in a lot of different directions, is what I'm trying to say. So I think really ensuring that we know what our priorities are, how to identify them, and that farmers understand that they're part of a bigger picture. They might be in District 12 or in District 4, but they're all together in the province of Manitoba, and they're representing themselves, a myriad of farmers in each of those districts. So really bringing those insights together, prioritizing, and working with our partners on addressing what those issues are. And I think that that's been in part what the challenge has been, in particular over the past 18 months. Without being able to meet in person, that's where a lot of these good conversations are able to happen. There's a lot of things that have happened over the past year that have really impacted farmers and this industry. So I think that we really know that we need to come back together. We need to start talking more. We need to be clear on expectations and those priorities.
I want to dig in a little bit on something you said there, because I think I fully agree with you, and that collaboration. And there's a lot of agricultural groups out there, and for the most part, they serve a role. But overall, there's more things that connect us than divide us. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Collectively here, you think of things like the UN Food Security Summit. You know, there's issues that internationally could affect us all, and sometimes I haven't seen that level of collaboration in my short time here, although I understand it's kind of improving. Is that kind of your view? Is that trend happening already, and how do we kind of expedite it? Because maybe it's not all situations, but certain ones in particular where we are actually united and, you know, go in a bunch of different directions only lets those that are trying to stop us, you know, separate us and peg us off.
So, and that's why when I say my priority with CAP is really around that collaboration, because we can always do better in it. It's something that we could always be looking for opportunities more. We don't really even know what is out there that is going to impact us. And the more we're doing some foresight analysis and understanding one another and talking, we're going to be able to identify that so we can really work towards a better future. I think there's been a bit of a breakdown in collaboration for a myriad of reasons that I have personally seen, which is why I think it needs to be our absolute priority in this industry. And there is a lot of good examples of good collaboration, but I think especially as industry associations, we're really challenged to show value. And so sometimes, you know, we are thinking about what's good for CAP, we'll say, or, you know, what's good for Cereals Canada, and is it good for everybody? And I think that that's where we really need to take our hats off on really key issues and say it isn't just about me. It's about something bigger than myself. And I look to so many examples where, you know, and I think the public trust is actually for me where I'm seeing a lot of good collaboration, and I think we're on a path forward there. I think that's a really interesting place to start. Consumers don't think in commodities.
No.
We think in commodities. So we pour millions of dollars into these wonderful, beautiful campaigns around how delicious my product is. And that's great. And we all have unique challenges. But consumers think as plates. They think of full meals. Like, what are we having for dinner tonight? How many times have we asked ourselves that? What are we having for dinner tonight? And it's not just, you know, a piece of chicken or a potato. It's about everything working together. And that's what creates that nutrition. That's what creates that enjoyment. That's what creates that celebration around a meal, is everything around that. So I think that collaboration on things like public trust is really that next step forward that I see, where we're already doing a lot of good work, but we can do better. I have a really good example, actually. So egg salad sandwiches give you a huge part of your dietary requirement for the day. Who thought? There's an actual study that talks about egg salad sandwiches. And going back to my previous role at Cereals Canada, working in the nutrition area, you know, trying to work with, you know, the Egg Farmers of Canada was something that I had thought as a kind of a dream from a national perspective. I hadn't gotten there yet, but to do a campaign about egg salad sandwiches, they're easy, they're affordable, they're tasty. If you already like eggs, put it in a sandwich, enjoy it. And wouldn't you know, it's healthy, it's good, and your family will love it. And I think that that's such a good message to give to our consumers. It's about the celebration. It's about the meal. It's about how we work together. Because it goes back to what I said. Farmers are seen as farmers. And what one farmer is doing or another farmer is doing, they might not think are impactful to one another, but they absolutely are. And that's how the world works. That's how we see it. Even with our international markets, the way that they look at Canada, they're not seeing individual provinces or individual farmers. They see us as the Canada brand. Right. And so that unification is already there. We just have to work together within that to really experience that ourselves.
Everything you say is just bang on.
Well,
couldn't be happier.
I
How
know.
about we collaborate over sampling another beer?
I think that that's a great idea. I actually didn't finish this one.
Oh,
so
that's okay.
No,
we want a fresh, cold one here. So for this one, we're going to go with the Fort Garry Rouge, the Canadian red lager. It's a 5%, 15 IBU. The Fort Garry Rouge is an amber lager that boasts a wonderful caramel character. Rouge is light, crisp, and slightly sweet on the finish.
I like sweet.
You are sweet.
I'm
There
pretty
you go.
sweet.
All right.
Okay, let's give another
Cheers.
cheers. Ooh.
Oh. Ooh, that's good. That is sweet.
That is really sweet.
Kind of like it has almost a cidery feel, but it's a beer.
I love it.
That's really good.
You know what's interesting is
Trying
that,
more on that one.
yeah, no, I'm definitely, this is just, it keeps on getting better.
This one's good. This one, it's my new leader.
You know what I really like about it? Is that it's like a really perfect balance, though, of sweet. So
Yeah.
even though it's sweeter,
It's a little tart enough that's just like
yeah,
balanced.
it has that tart.
Yeah.
It's,
This is one I could drink many of, and I think I'd still like. It's not a. It's
I'm not afraid of drinking more than one.
It's not a one-off or no.
I'm not afraid of just drinking more.
It's a good drink. So I'd like to shift over kind of to the communications world, which is where you came from on your most recent job, and I think it's probably fair to say you've become a bit of an expert in communicating agricultural issues, as evident by the conversation we're having here today. And you're obviously going to take that and continue with CAP even in a leadership role. I know that. But do you have any sort of philosophy when it comes to communicating our issues to government? And perhaps more importantly, you've touched on a number of times on public trust. How do we communicate to the broader public who are, again, less and less connected to the farm? How do we improve this or continue to improve it?
Well, I think, so you asked me first, what is kind of my core of how I communicate? Being human. And I think that when we look at where we've been successful in agriculture, is really being human in our approach, where we haven't been, as a science-based industry, as we talked about with vaccines and technology and all of that, which makes us so wonderful and powerful and strong. And, our regulatory system, all these things that we have here in Canada that really, why people love buying Canadian is really great. But that doesn't always work when you're communicating. Communicating a fact doesn't feel like anything.
No.
And I think in a world where people are getting further and further away from science and facts and from agriculture, we're creating more barriers for ourselves when we do that. Being human. Understand. And I think it's funny, something that we didn't add into my experience is I used to run an organic health food store in Winnipeg, like a grocery store.
Well, you said it, I just cut it out.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding.
I really loved that opportunity because I think it also showcases the diversity of Manitoba. I was able to work directly with farmers who would deliver their product, but I was able to work with consumers and food. Consumers and food we're all consumers and we all love to eat and we all like to drink our beers. Cheers again, Branden,
Cheers.
to this delicious one here.
Really good.
And how people make their purchasing decisions. And it's about health. It's about wellness. It's about affordability. It's about, does it taste good? It's about, hey, we're having company over and I want to, make something special for them. And I think we fail to recognize the personability of those kinds of choices. And we're part of a sector that's generating that. So it's not just about food. That's not what our industry is just about, but it's a big part of it. It's a big part that forces decisions and regulations upon that industry. So that human approach and meeting people really where they are, and not condemning them for making a choice. Even for protein alternatives, like that's really a strong story for agriculture. We have answers for you. We have something that we can provide you here in agriculture. What you want, we have. So I think that human approach is really, really important. And transparency. We talk so much about transparency. And I think we've made some really significant strides to do that. I've seen really good examples of it. Even with the plant breeding technology work that's happening right now with Health Canada, how the industry has come together to work on that, work with Health Canada, and that's where that collaboration example is really, really strong. That transparency is really important. Being transparent with the public is going to be a really big component of that. And how we're communicating what has used this technology. I think we've learned a lot from that science-based approach. So when I look at what's our future and how do we go and how do we use this knowledge, we have to be able to talk about things. We have to be able to talk about the history of this industry, where we've come from, our grassroots, where we want to go, what's our vision for the future, creating healthy, nutritious, quality products for people here at home as well as all over the world to be able to use. There's alternative uses for our products, right, as well. What you grow could be used for fuel. It could be used for the textile industry. So there's so many
Cosmetics, there's
wonderful
all sorts of uses.
Cosmetics, absolutely. So I think that there's so many things here that's a great unifier. And actually, something that I forgot to mention earlier about, we have more that brings us together than what's apart. something I've learned with farmers is that there's lots of issues in this industry. There's lots of things that could divide us. But every farmer, no matter how big or how small they are, is a business owner. They're there, they're committed. And it's not just a business that they run 9 to 5, they live it, they breathe it. And they want to progress and live better for the future for themselves, their family, and their community. That's an amazing unifier that we can really build upon. So when we're sitting at a table and we're trying to figure out, how to make common sense and make good decisions together, always remember that there's more in common in this industry, and it goes to that, that fulsome commitment that we each have. That's a really great starting point.
So a couple points out of that, and I fully agree with you, the hearts and minds element of this, because facts don't matter, unfortunately.
No.
I look forward to the day in 10 or 20 years when we realize that facts do matter, and we'll return to that, but we're not there right now. But, you mentioned kind of the role in which farmers play, and I think to an earlier answer you had where you said, public opinion shows that farmers are trusted by the population, but when farmers who use GMO, it drops off. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts on, not necessarily the GMO debate, I don't think we need to get into that, but what role do farmers have in communicating to the general public our story? And how do we further utilize them? And I think that's certainly one thing that, as you mentioned, that they are the best people to tell their story because they live and breathe this.
Absolutely. And we've definitely seen as an industry, I'll give a good example, even on the mental health side. When you have a farmer talk about their experience over the past even year, even childcare. Like, think about childcare right now for farmers. Schools are closed, daycares are closed. Their job isn't 9 to 5.
Right.
It's all day. So being able to talk about their experiences, about what they're living through, challenges that they've had, helps other farmers. Right? That helps one another. Hey, if this person's experiencing it, then it's okay for me to experience it too. Because it is like a big family, this industry. So we learn a lot from each other. So I think when farmers tell their story, it can influence the other farmers that are their neighbors, that are in their community, even if it's from a different province or from a different region of the world. That's why Twitter is so powerful. It's farmers connecting with farmers from Canada to Australia to India to Africa, Europe. They're able to connect in a second with one another about a common issue. So there is that farmer story can influence one another. Now, how that is used for the public, I think we need to be really aware that people are curious. People really want to know. And that's where I go back to CCFI, the Center of Food Integrity, and their data when they look at, who is this community that are farmers, right? And how do we get the public to understand what a farmer is? Well, let's ask them some questions about what they think farmers are so we can kind of address that. Consumers, there's the group that will probably not be supportive of what a modern conventional farmer will do.
Facts don't matter, we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the other group who are maybe more like us, who are like, we live it, we breathe it. We get to work in this industry every day. We're the fortunate ones. But then there's that mushy middle, the people in the middle, which are about, I think, 60% or so of the population. I don't have the facts right. Go check out CCFI website for their latest data download. But that mushy middle, they're so influenced, and they're not influenced by facts. They're influenced by stories. So I think talking to them, and it's not even just about running a flashy campaign. It's about at your local grocery store. If you hear somebody ask a question, it's around your kitchen table. Talk about what you do. Explain it. And that's where that human approach, not saying, well, we do it because it's right and we're feeding the world. We can't always take that approach with everybody. We need to understand, well, why do you think that using a crop protection product is wrong? Well, a lot of times it's, well, I want something that's sustainable. I want something that's healthy. Well, wouldn't you know that using a crop protection product is actually an answer to that? And let me sit here and talk to you about why. So I think it's about sometimes capturing the people closest to us to be able to have those conversations. Then now how farmers are used by the industry and by the sector to leverage that message and to say, hey, I want to be a stronger voice out to a larger public base, whether it be in the media or writing an op-ed or, CropLife did an amazing program called Real Farm Lives. That was spectacular. I loved that program. Now, how do we get that out to the public, right? How do we get that out more? And that was really their goal, is how do we leverage this? I said, I want to see this on CBC. I want to get this on TV because it's so powerful. How they did that program was phenomenal. And it is online, realfarmlives.ca, I think is the website. But it's a really good example of how when we have farmers tell their story in a really meaningful way. Like a lot of times people say, oh, it's just big corporate farms. Just because a farm's incorporated doesn't mean that it's not a family run operation.
Exactly.
And that's where I think our farms aren't getting smaller.
Nope.
Farms are getting bigger and bigger. And over time, we are going to see a decline in the number of farms. So it's going to become more and more important that we talk about the family, the history, what this means, the commitment of sustainability, using the right technology. That does have to come directly from farmers.
I think you're bang on.
Wow, I just could, look at it. I'm just checking boxes.
I want you to enjoy a sip of that because we're going to get to our third one here shortly. But I'm just going to ask a more life question. How have you been what have you done to escape the city during the pandemic or otherwise? Where do you like to go? How have you kind of survived through this pandemic experience being locked away like the rest of us here, but in a city?
I bought a house.
There we go.
I bought a house out of the city.
Oh,
yeah.
Easy answer.
I was living in a 600 square foot condo in downtown Winnipeg and said, I'm going a bit squirrely. And so I bought a house, and that's in St. Anne, Manitoba. Shout out to District 4 and loving it.
Yeah.
Just got a new front door. So I have a passion for interior design and decorating.
Oh.
And so that's kind of something I used to do as a small business on the side. So
Interesting.
I find a lot of my passion outside of agriculture lies in that area.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I could use a fresh coat of paint or two at my house in Ottawa. So
Well,
when
take
you
some
travel,
pictures.
Well, no, I need you to come and do it too. I need planning and then
Oh, I will totally.
full end-to-end operation here. Right?
Okay, well, Branden, sign me up.
Okay, chill.
But make sure you start saving money now, because I'll spend it all.
I'm going to leave that low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, exactly.
So I got one more question before we have our third drink here. Who have your mentors been? I mean, your personality pretty clearly lends itself to, quickly becoming friends with a lot of people. So I know there's perhaps too many to highlight, but who's really made their mark on you in these last 5 years in particular within the ag world and helped you get where you are today at the new role of CAP?
Okay, that's super funny. I was going to say, you're saying I'm really popular, aren't you, Branden?
Well, you might be.
You're buttering me up.
That's true.
Well,
I know that.
I'd be remiss not to say, and mostly because he's here sitting listening to this, Cam Dahl was a really big part of that discovery of loving agriculture. Seeing his passion, seeing his commitment on a daily basis, an hourly basis, with whatever was coming up, taking time to sit with me, to teach me, help me understand what the issues really are. I think it's really easy, especially for me, make quick decisions. And he's like, whoa, just wait, step back. Let's look at the big picture. Like, let's look at it beyond your own personal experience or the way that you think. So that really helped me broaden my horizons. Trish Jordan, of course, working with her, and especially from that more industry side. What have they learned? What have they been doing as an industry? What were mistakes as a company that they made, and how did they recover has been really helpful for me. Jim Smolik is a really dear friend who, through agriculture, we've become a bit of a family. But yet again, someone who started farming in the Peace region 36 years ago, started BC Grain Producers, he was the past president of Grain Growers of Canada. Aaron Gowerlich is actually someone who I really admire, enjoy working with. And more than that, is someone who's always willing to take that time I can't even tell you the number of times that I've called her and said, hey, how do you deal with this? Or how do you navigate this? And taking that time to support you and being that mentor for you. So there's so many people along the way. And that's where I think the people that become your friends and that become your family really are the people that stay with you all along. But there's people I've met on an airplane that I say, whoa, I'm going to treasure that moment for the rest of my life. But yeah, it definitely goes back to the people who are there every day, coaching me, guiding me, always answering the phone when I call, even though they probably shouldn't, because I'll probably talk to them for 6 hours, but they do. So no, it's been meaningful. And actually, from a beyond leadership standpoint, the people who are my, my peers, my daily peers on the day to day, Daniel Ramage, my former coworker at Cereals Canada, challenging me. You can do better. You can try something different. So those, I think, going back to the question around how do other young people, stay in this industry? How do they get to the leadership roles? How do they whatever? Ask your coworkers, how can I do better? How can I do things? How can I think of things? What do you think of the situation? Working together and recognizing, like I say to you, I said this to you the first week I met you, the first day I met you, we're going to be working together for the next 30 years. So we need to figure out how to make things work.
Yeah.
So I think looking to your peers and saying, how are we going to work together? How are we going to choose to communicate and learn from each other? So I have a lot of those people in my life.
It's a pretty powerful message and very true. And it's that self-awareness to be smart enough to ask people around you how you can improve.
You're really fast at bringing out these next rounds of beer, by the way.
Well, I they're on ice. The ice is melting. We got a nice sunny day here. I want to make sure we try them.
It's a beautiful day.
This will be our third and final sample of the day. And I saved it for last because I had a feeling that you might be a big fan of it. This is the Fort Garry Brewery Legendary Lemon Radler. It's a 5% malt forward radler infused with lemon juice, offering a tangy citrus punch. Does that sound like it's up your alley?
Absolutely. As soon as you had said a radler earlier, I was
That's why I
fully
put it last year for you.
Fully game.
All right, you got that there. All right. Cheers.
To number 3.
To number 3. You got to pick after. Think hard. Oh boy.
Oh,
Oh boy.
Holy guacamole.
What do you think? That's a good you like guacamole, it sounds like, too.
I love guacamole. This would be great with some guacamole
Actually,
and
that
chips.
that'd be a really nice mix. We'll get some after.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. So next year it'll be beers with Branden as well as guacamole and chips.
Yeah,
on the
side. Well,
with a side of.
Side. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Well, while we sip on this one here, I have a big question that when you were at Cereals Canada, you were quite involved in the responsible grain code of practice development, or at least the communications of. So the process is still ongoing. We have a What We Heard report and a commitment to come back with revisions in sometime later this fall. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about the development of this, the process, and the outcome and purpose of the voluntary code. So I know you're not working directly anymore with it, but I wonder if you could kind of walk us through this process from your perspective, and maybe from a big picture perspective, why do we need it, and why do we need to define our own sustainability story here in Canada?
I think it requires us, and it's interesting because Cam, and I actually think you should ask him this question as well. He's the former chair of the CRSC and was also heavily involved. I think we need to take a step back and look at what are our priorities as an industry. And public trust, sustainability, that success for the future are really those 3 pillars that we see. And questions around how do we get there? What's our roadmap? To demonstrate public trust, you need to be able to actually show it and prove it, and then talk about it. And that's where we see code of practice examples. The beef industry was actually the guide and the model for the code of practice for grain. So when we look at the responsible beef code, the CRSB, to have responsible beef, you have to have responsible feed, right? And so that's really where there's been a push within, the CRSC managing this and taking this on, was that the feed component of that is important. But for crops in general, we're seeing market access challenges around the world happening that could be mitigated and reduced by having tools like a code of practice. So that's where with the Grains Roundtable, this is going back quite a number of years, about 3 years ago, there was consensus around our path forward on how to address it, how to show and demonstrate that sustainability commitment from Canadian farmers, because they're already doing it. That's what's so wonderful about our industry. And I think that's where when we get into, like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there's not questions and there's not issues and that there's not significant concern. And that's why listening to farmers is at the core. We need them at the table. This is their code. This is their code. This isn't my code. This isn't Grain Growers Code. This isn't the CRC code. This is a farmer code. So having farmers at the table was right from the beginning a central point for it. Ted Menzies, you talk about mentors. Wow, working with Ted Menzies has been one of the most wonderful experiences of my life, and his care and his consideration and that representation of farmers through this process has been really great. But there were other farmers on committees. We had 50% on the actual code development. Farmers being there were really, really important. Communicating that out to growers is really essential. What the code is for, what the intention is, the challenges around market access. Those are things that on the day-to-day on your farm that you might not be thinking of because you're thinking about how dry it is and the challenges that you're facing. But those are why, organizations like Cereals Canada or Canola Council or Pulse Canada are working on those issues. And so communicating, there are real challenges that we're facing here at home around public trust and elsewhere that are influencing you and your business. Because what ends up happening in the path really is we have processors that are feeling the pressure. We have governments that are feeling the pressure around perceptions around what farmers are doing. They're making decisions that impact your business as a farmer. A code of practice helps mitigate and reduce that risk. It gives the industry, the sector, it gives you as a farmer something to point to. And so going into a consultation, that's why the consultation was so important. Getting farmers involved and engaged. There were things in there farmers were really opposed to. That's why there's a consultation. Have your input. Share your voice. That is so important. And that's why it's good now. There's a What We Heard report. That's a consolidation of that. That'll be available on the Responsible Grain website. I'm no longer involved with the project, but do encourage farmers, no matter where you're at in the position of how you feel about it, go take a look, see what it is. There's going to be a white paper that's going to be done later this year. And then there will be a consideration at that point to say how we continue, where we continue, have another consultation with the redrafted code. Hear again from farmers, see if we've met what works for them. And I think what's interesting, it's voluntary. It's a voluntary code. There are already examples where a code in place would have reduced regulation. There are examples of that to be put in place. So, there's a hope to build a path forward on this. I encourage farmers to get involved and most importantly, ask those questions. It is your code. I know it's a hot button issue. I live in downtown Winnipeg, or was living in downtown Winnipeg. It's not up to me to tell you how to operate your business. But there are pressures out there that are making decisions for you, and they do hurt the operation. These are tools to help mitigate that, and that's really the goal here. So get involved, be involved, check out the website, look at what's been done, look for the next consultation cycle, come and participate in a session. CAP actually did, and that was a really great exercise for the farmers who are around our board table and committees. They were involved in that and have had positive feedback. Not necessarily positive to, yes, the code is great, we're supportive, but we were able to be involved. We were able to ask questions. We were able to see where did this come from. So I think when we look at the code of practice, the responsible grain, the intention of it, where it came from, these are tools that we need. And as a sector, we got to figure out a way to do that. And this is where in Canada, our Canada brand is influenced by it. Other countries are much further ahead than we are. They're making some really big strides. And in fact, our farmers are already doing the work. So we need to be able to have a way to tell that story in a way that makes sense. And the code helps do that.
Well said. Well, I have one final question before I let you go.
What?
And it's a big one.
Oh, what's my favorite?
It's what's your favorite between the English Amber Ale, the Rouge Canadian Red Lager, or the legendary Lemon Radler?
I love them all.
What
No.
are you, a politician now?
No, I already know. It's the Radler.
It is very good, eh?
It is really good, but I'm someone who loves lemon anyway. It's always been a favorite, but these are all very, very good. And in fact, like Fort Garry is a great brewery. And, they have a lot of great options. So I think no matter what you would want or whatever your flavor is, they have something for you.
Yep.
But today, my friend, it's the Radler.
Radler? All right. Well, I'm going to go with the Rouge.
Rattle on.
But rattle on. All right. Well, Brenna, thank you so much for coming out. Thanks for making a trip out here to the farm for starters. It's
Happy to
great.
be here.
It's great to see you in person again, and just thanks so much for joining and giving us some, I'd say, really inspiring answers for folks to chew on.
Thank you. Well, Branden, it's always a pleasure. I think this is a great idea. And last thought: get out there, get involved, ask questions, join Zoom meetings. There's no reason why we can't be engaging and interacting during these really tough times. And hope to see some of you very soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brenna, General Manager of the Keystone Agricultural Producers. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Beer Canada, the voice of those who make our nation's beers. Thank you to Fort Garry Brewery in Winnipeg for providing these excellent products to taste. And I would encourage you to stop by and find out for yourself next time you're in Winnipeg. Most importantly, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another special guest that I think you'll find very interesting. In the meantime, if you want to stay up to date with all things Grain Growers of Canada, please follow us on Twitter @GrainGrowers or on Instagram @Canada's Grain Growers. Until next time, get out there and explore more products available from Fort Garry Brewery and enjoy some high-quality Canadian grains in Canada's favorite summertime drink, Canadian beer. Take care.